you and I are in the same office building and I think you look at me funny. That registers as a threat. We don't think of it this way, but it ties into our need for safety. Because if we're coworkers and I think you look at me funny, that could affect my standing within the group, for instance. It could affect my job security. These bigger things that are important in my life. You know? And I don't consciously work all this out in my brain. It's just this instinctive, impulsive, emotional part of my brain kind of takes over and says, hey, something's going on with Eric. That's, could spell trouble. We need to do something about this. We made it back for another episode. That's exciting. So, episode 2, you made a reference to me earlier in conversation. You referred to this persona, for lack of a better word, and you called it Stupid Eric. And I wanted to know more about that, but hey, we need content for the podcast, so don't ask about it in real time. In real life, we're saving it for this. So what in the world do you mean by Stupid Eric? Who is Stupid Eric?
It's a new concept that I've recently been introduced to. I guess I've understood the concept for a while, but it's kind of a new way to frame it. So my business coach is a guy named Steve Leach out of Australia, and he and I were talking one day, and he started talking about Stupid Steve, and I thought, okay, so who's Stupid Steve and who's Stupid Eric? And stupid is the version of us that basically is the self-saboteur. Okay. So, when there's something that I know that I should be doing, but I find something else to do. So perfect example, the most recent time I can think that stupid showed up, I had on my calendar blocked time to make cold calls, right? I've got an ebook out on Facebook on putting systems in your business. And when people download the ebook, they put their name and their phone number, their email address in there. And then I pick up the phone, I give them a call and just say, hey, what was it about the ebook that made you want to download it? Right. So there's a part of me that doesn't want to pick up the phone and call people, right? Because I don't like people picking up the phone and calling me, but it goes back to the whole, okay, you can't help people if they don't know you exist, right? So Stupid stepped in and said, the black toner cartridge in your printer is out and you can't print. And what if you need to print something? So instead of picking up the phone and making phone calls, I listened to Stupid. I got up, grabbed my keys, and spent 30 hours on a trip to the office supply store to go buy a new toner cartridge that I could have picked up at some point when I was driving by a store, right? But Stupid steps in and says, hey, wait, that's something we don't want to do. Let's focus on something else, right? I know I should be doing this, but I'm going to take the trash out instead. My dad, whenever we'd have, company come in or my mom needed him to help her with something, he was notorious for going and washing the windows, right? So it's that, why do we do these silly little things that really don't bring any value when we know we should be doing something else?
Gotcha. So Stupid Eric is avoidant Eric.
Yes. Yeah. So Stupid Eric, it's funny. Steve and I were talking about the stupid, and we all have a stupid too, right? We just picked on me, but I hope you don't climb through the screen and strangle me, but there's a Stupid Greg, I'm sure. And just like Stupid Eric, he gets in the way. And Steve and I were talking about coaching clients, and he said there are 3 reasons that clients won't do their work, what they're supposed to do. Number 1 is they don't have enough direction. Number 2 is they have too much direction. Or number 3 is stupid gets in the way. And what he meant by that is, let's say that I'm working with a client and we're talking about getting them to a point where they can move into more of a CEO type of role within the business, right? They've got their employees who are well-trained. They've got clear KPIs. They've got good systems. They're executing well. And the business is really starting to run on its own. And now this individual can step up and say, okay, I am, I'm at the CEO level. Now I'm more of a visionary. I get to be a leader. And Stupid says, well, I don't see myself as a leader. It kind of goes back to the imposter syndrome that we talked about in the first episode, right? I don't see myself in that way. So I am going to self-sabotage at this lower level so I can't get myself to that next level.
Gotcha. Yeah. So as weird as this might sound, That ties right into like our fight or flight response to that part of our brain. Um, we think of like fight or flight, and we think of, you know, there's a boogeyman chasing us down the alley, or we cross paths with a bear in the woods, or something more extreme like that. But all kinds of things trigger that part of our brain. It's our limbic system. It's this, you might call it a more primitive part of our brain. Animals have that part of the brain just like we do. But then we have this other part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, that allows us to think at a higher level. The reason we can, drive cars and use cell phones is because we have this prefrontal cortex that animals don't have. But that limbic system piece, a big part of what it does is it keeps us safe, so we very much need it. And part of how it keeps us safe is it's constantly scanning for threats. And now those can be big threats. Those can be the bear in the woods or the mugger in the alley. Okay. But it can be little things too. It can be, you and I are in the same office building and I think you look at me funny. That registers as a threat, you know? And we don't think of it this way, but it does. It ties into this like safety. It ties into our need for safety, because if we're coworkers and I think you look at me funny, that could affect my standing within the group. For instance, it could affect my job security. These bigger things that are important in my life, you know. And I don't consciously work all this out in my brain. It's just this instinctive, impulsive, emotional part of my brain kind of takes over and says, "Hey, something's going on with Eric. That's, could spell trouble. We need to do something about this." Now, hopefully that is where our prefrontal cortex kicks in and spits out some logic and says, now hold on a second. You don't know he's looking at you funny. For all we know, he could be looking at something on the wall behind me, or he could be, maybe he is gazing in my direction, but he's thinking about something else. He's not even thinking about me.
Mhm.
Or even if he is looking at me funny, I don't know why, you know? So there's all these possible explanations, but there's that like, oh, something's wrong instinct that I have to sort through. So going back to this avoidant thing you're talking about, there's something about that that seems threatening. Again, it doesn't have to be life catastrophic type threat, but there's something about it that seems threatening. And so there's this instinct, fight or flight, which in this case, the avoidant thing is flight. It's escape. It's, I don't want to deal with this, you know? And then what's unfortunate is whether we choose fight or flight, if it works, we're more likely to try it again next time. Because that part of our brain doesn't care about long-term results. It only cares about the moment. So rationally, I might know long-term, this is a bad strategy, but it felt better momentarily. And so next time this pops up, I'm going to do that again. So my question to you would be the phone calls, picking up and calling people. What might be the threat there?
Well, that's a great question. I think the threat is I think it's a self-created. You're talking about this, and then you made me start thinking about the human brain is really good at filling in the gaps, right? If we don't have all the information, we go ahead and we start telling ourselves a story. And a lot of times that story is not the rosy picture that we would like it to be, right? We tend to fill in those gaps with what's the worst that could happen. And I think that's part of it is, okay, I'm going to pick up this phone and somebody's going to cuss me out, right? Be mean to me, which honestly hasn't happened. I mean, I've made probably at least 1,000 calls, since I've been doing this. And I think the worst thing that has happened has been somebody said, "I don't remember requesting that. Take me off your list." Right. And it didn't hurt. And even if somebody did say, "Who are you? Why the hell are you calling me? Leave me alone. I'm reporting you to the FCC, the FDA, one of the Fs," so what, right? I can still go on. And I think about, I try now to think about, okay, what's the good that's come from this behavior and this activity? And I have several clients who are on board with me now because I picked up the phone, had a conversation with them. They recognized that there was an opportunity for me to help them. And as a result, it's been a win-win situation, right? Because I'm helping them grow their business, and obviously, they're paying clients. So it's really funny to look at that and say, okay, and I think it goes exactly what you just said. Stupid's jumping in. Stupid's not thinking about the fact that there are 4, 5, 6, 10, 100 people out there who I could help grow their business, help them free up their time, help them build a better team, help them build that business that they envisioned when they first started. But stupid doesn't want to focus on that, right? And the impact that that can have. Stupid wants to focus on, well, what if somebody's mean to me, right? And shuts it down. And I think we wrestle with stupid every single day, multiple times, right? It's like being a boxer or an MMA fighter. You just got to go in there and you got to win as many rounds as you can, because you're not gonna win them all. I think the other thing, Steve and I were talking about is scheduling time with stupid. So on your calendar, going ahead and saying, okay, this is when I'm going to let myself do the dumb stuff. This is when I'm going to say, all right, right now I'm thinking that I need to go get a toner, or, it'd probably be a good idea if I filled up my water before I made my phone calls, or it'd probably be a good idea for me to check my email, make sure no urgent messages came in from one of my clients, right? Which rarely, if ever, happens, right? But it's stupid jumping in there and being able to say, you know what? No, I'm going to schedule that time to be able to spend time with stupid Eric later in the day. But right now I need to focus on what's important and what I know is going to be the best thing for me, for my business, for my clients, for my family, whatever it might be.
You talk about spending time with stupid Eric. I think that's good. I would encourage anybody who finds himself in that situation, when you are spending time with that stupid um, think about why. Why does stupid Eric not want to do this? Why is stupid Eric afraid of getting cussed out on the phone? Somewhere in life, stupid Eric got hurt in some way or witnessed something like that happen. And, unfortunately, that's part of being human. We all, from time to time, experience some negative events in our life. And then so that, sets in like, well, I don't want to go through that again. I want to avoid that. So even though, like you said, you've called a whole bunch of people, it hasn't happened. There's still that what if, because sometime in life, something like that, happened, or you saw something like that happen. So what stupid Eric really needs, like if we want to help stupid Eric not be stupid, not be avoidant, like we're talking about, is some comfort followed by some rationality, you know? Um, not trying to insult you or anybody that might be listening, or myself, because it applies to all of us. All these like needs that we have in childhood that we think we outgrow as adults, we never actually outgrow them. It's just circumstances change, different things change in our lives and with this, but that need, when a baby's crying, what do? You pick it up, you try to comfort the baby, and then try to figure out what it needs, so that you can help the situation. That's what we need too. We're just not babies anymore, and so it expresses itself differently. So, okay, what does stupid Eric need right now? Well, he's got some kind of fear. Okay, how can we kind of calm that down?
So you said stupid needs comfort. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, just something to help calm. So like, you can go back to the baby analogy. If your baby's crying, what's your first instinct? To pick it up. You pick up the baby. You walk around with it, rock it, maybe give it a kiss on the forehead, whatever. Some kind of nurturing thing like that. Well, you're not going to do that to yourself as an adult, but think about what's accomplished there. That sense of like safety. The baby knows that like, okay, my parent is here. It's looking out for me. So it's that same thing. Like you can provide that to yourself. So for instance, you're not gonna, rock yourself. That would look a little weird probably if someone discovered that.
Curl up in a ball on the floor in the fetal position. Yeah. No.
But you can do things like, take a second, relax, do some deep breaths, or take a walk around outside, something to kind of calm your nervous system down. And that allows, like I talked about a while ago, when you're in that spot, that limbic system, the part that is all instinct and emotion is driving the bus, so to speak. We want to get them out of the driver's seat and get the prefrontal cortex, the good decision-making part of our brain, back in the driver's seat. If you can just take a moment to kind of calm yourself down, it will allow you to get the prefrontal cortex back in the driver's seat. So something simple. It doesn't have to be long and drawn out. You don't have to do 20
Mhm.
minutes of meditation, although 20 minutes of meditation can be really helpful. Just taking a few deep breaths, just taking a lap around the building, you know, just to kind of calm yourself and then start that self-talk, you know? So, hey, we're good. We're good,
So
man. We got, 100 calls to make. We're not going to get them all. We never have. That's all right. You know, things have
right.
gone well so far. Hey, no one's cussed me out so far. And even if they do, what if, you said you like to go to the worst case scenario sometimes. Sometimes when I'm working with people, we indulge that. Okay, let's say worst case scenario happens. So to you, so you pick up, you call somebody and they do cuss you out on the phone. What then? How would you deal with it?
Yeah, and that's a great point because it might actually turn into a great opportunity. It might be one of those things if they don't hang up to say something like, "Hey, sounds like you're having a pretty rough day. Is everything okay?" Right? And actually end up engaging that person and maybe, being able to help them, whether they end up, sitting down and talking about being a client or not, that's fine. But, I think sometimes people, we're really good at putting on a face in public around, the people at work or whatever it is. But strangers and the people we love tend to be the ones that we take things out on, right? Because we've all seen it, the Karen episodes or whatever, where somebody at a store just loses their mind on somebody. Or, I say it all the time, especially when I was in corporate America, it's like, I'd go and I'd do this, do this job that I was doing and come back and all the stresses that were pent up for the day, it seems like I would suddenly just kind of snap over something silly, right? And let it all bubble out. So being able to potentially be a stopgap or a break for that person or to help them recognize what's going on could end up being a very positive thing. So, or, they may call me everything, every dirty word in the book and hang up on me. And you know what? At that point, then it's just an opportunity to say, well, that should probably be the worst call that I have to deal with today, right? That's what I like to do when I'm on the elliptical trainer. When I hit I look forward to hitting that hardest part of it because I know once I pass through that, the workout won't be any harder than what I just did, right? So being able to kind of flip it around and look at it and say, okay, that's not probably going to happen again. The chances are, I'm this much closer to having the phone call that I want to make when I pass through that challenging one. I think something else that can be helpful too is having a reward on the other end of it. So, like when I do my marketing videos, a little plug here. We're not getting paid for this, ladies and gentlemen. So, but I'll get a Coke Zero. I'll allow myself to get a Coke Zero after I complete filming my videos. And that's for two reasons. Number one, it's kind of a reward. Number two, if I'm drinking it during the videos, I tend to burp and then I have to redo the videos, right? So I think sometimes having that reward system in place, and maybe I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, the reward system, but maybe there's a punishment system in there as well. If I don't do this, if I let stupid win here, then what's the negative punishment I'm going to, I guess, enact on myself, whether it's I got to take cold showers for, until I make these phone calls or sleep on the floor or, whatever it might be.
Yeah. The reward, thing is great. I mean, that's, in the world of psychology, it's called that positive reinforcement, just something to, hey, I did what I was supposed to do. Now I get a treat. It's just like if you were training your dog, you know. One of my professors in grad school actually said that. He said, if you can train a dog, you can train a person because it's all reinforcement, you know. Um, so yeah, that reward thing works well. What I have found, the punishment angle sometimes works in the short term, but it doesn't work for the long term. If you're trying to avoid a negative consequence that might get you out of the gate, so to speak, eventually that fear is going to subside. One day you're going to wake up and say, this is dumb. I control the shower knob. I don't have to take a cold shower, so I'm not going to, and now that doesn't work anymore. positive reinforcement is a lot better motivator, especially long term, than negative reinforcement. Going back to the idea of like shooting for what you want, instead of focusing all your energy on what you want to avoid. We talked a little bit about that in the last episode. But I think the reward idea is good. And I think, just to backtrack a little bit, like indulging yourself. Okay, what is the worst case scenario? Like you said, worst case scenario, somebody cusses me out, and okay, then the worst call of the day is over, because that's the thing. When we allow ourselves to actually play it out in our head, what we find is most of the time, the worst case scenario, we can deal with it. It's not that we enjoy it, but it's not the end of the world, you know? Um, and then that can bring, just knowing that brings some relief. But I always encourage people, if you're going to do the worst case scenario, you have to ask yourself the opposite end of that, which is, what's the best case scenario? Okay. So my anxious, nervous self is dwelling on this worst case scenario, but it's just as likely I could have a really good outcome. So what would that be? You know? Because when we're all worked up and anxious, we don't think about that, but it's still there. I'm sure, like you said, you've picked up plenty of clients from doing these calls. So that is possible, you know? It's just that version of you isn't thinking about that in the moment.
Well, and I think that having an accountability factor built in can be helpful too, right? Because when I get on with my coach and he says, how many of your calls did you make? I don't want to get on there. Well, I didn't do what I was supposed to. But it made me think of a story, a coach I know an action coach I know over in Arizona. He had a client who one of his goals was to write a book. And Tom told the guy, all right, here's what I want you to do. Because the guy was having a hard time getting started, getting it done. He said, the guy had young kids, and he said, I want you to go to your kids. Where do they want to go? What experience do they want to have? He said, well, they keep saying that they want to go to Disney. And he said, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to them, and I want you to tell them, when you finish writing your book, you're going to take them to Disney. Right. So he built in this accountability, because every time he came home from work, the kids asked him, Dad, did you do any work on your book? When are you going to work on your book? Dad, we're going to give you some time this weekend to work on your book. Right. Because they wanted to go to Disney. So he was constantly getting that feedback, getting that feedback loop from his kids. And he had that additional accountability. I've heard other stories of people. It's like, this is something I really need to do, but I don't want to do it. So the coach will have them write a check to an organization they don't like, right? So I'm an OSU guy, right? So maybe I have to write a check to the University of Oklahoma booster, football program, or the NIL or whatever, and then I give that to the coach. And if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, then the coach mails the check off to my, arch rival or whatever, right? So if you're a big Democrat, it goes to the Republican National Party. If you're a big Republican, it goes to the Democratic National Party, whatever. But the beautiful thing about that is then you get a reminder of the failure, because you continue to get solicitations from that group that you sent money to. Because I think we've all done it. If you sent money to somebody once, they're going to ask you for money again. So I think it's kind of a humorous way to look at it. And I think it also gives you an opportunity to see how serious people really are about doing that thing, right? Because I think it goes back to, what's your level of commitment to this, and do you recognize what the positive outcome is at the end, like you're talking about?
Absolutely. And then I think, remembering that the actual outcome is usually somewhere in the middle. It's probably not going to be your worst case scenario. Honestly, it's probably not going to be your best case scenario either. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. Whatever that middle is, same thing. Like, what would I do if that was the outcome? If someone, they didn't sign up immediately for the biggest package you have, but they didn't cuss you out either. Maybe they agreed to a consultation, or they agreed to meet with you at one of your quarterly events or something like that. Hey, that's gives you a foothold. It gives you a place to start.
Yeah, well, and I think, stupid doesn't just show up in our business. I think it shows up in our personal life too, right? I mean, how many times I'm thinking about, and I don't know why this popped into my head. I think most people have seen the movie Saving Private Ryan. And when I think it was Giovanni Ribisi's character gets shot and he's passing away. So sorry, spoiler alert, but if you haven't seen Saving Private Ryan by now, There's still more that I won't share. But anyway, and he's laying there and he's talking about how he had a working mom and she would come in and sometimes he would pretend to be asleep, even though he was awake and he knew that she wanted to talk to him and he didn't even know why he did that. And I think stupid shows up in our personal lives as well in instances.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's the same thing. Like, there's some kind of something in our background, that triggers some kind of fear or some kind of, something we want to avoid, you know. And maybe we can't pinpoint it in the moment, like you said in the movie, he doesn't know why he did that. Um, but there's something there. But I think also I think it's also oh man, I think it's important to not get too hung up in all that, like shoulda, woulda, coulda stuff. Because we're all gonna make mistakes along the way. And, something I tell clients sometimes is, you need a little bit of guilt. It serves a purpose in that can learn from your mistakes. You want to learn from your mistakes, but everything beyond that is going to be detrimental, you know? So, okay, this is what I did wrong. This is how I need to handle it next time. But then if I keep beating myself up, it's going to create that negative feedback loop where I feel bad about myself, that I'm not going to do as well. And then I'm going to feel worse about myself. And then I'm not going to do even, and it's just going to create a negative spiral. So, okay, I went and got toner instead of making the calls. Shouldn't have done that. This is what I missed out on by making that decision. I don't want to miss out on that again. Next time I'll make the calls, but we don't have to sit and just wallow in the disappointment of, man, I'm a loser. I'm not good at this, whatever.
Yeah, it's the whole concept of, when you find yourself in a hole, the first thing you got to do is stop digging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you talked about pinpointing, kind of the reason, the why stupid ends up winning. So when you're working with clients, what are some of the things that you do with them to help them pinpoint that experience that maybe happened to them in their childhood?
Yeah, well, that's kind of a drawn out process. I can walk you kind of through the steps, but just know that when I'm saying this, it doesn't necessarily happen in like 30 minutes. It usually starts with looking at the here and now. The like you example of I was supposed to make phone calls, instead I went and bought toner. You look at the examples that are going on right now, and then ask, okay, what was my self-talk? What was I telling myself in the moment to make that seem like a good idea? Whether it was or not, I was telling myself something to convince myself to do that. So you start with looking at a few of those examples. And then after you look at a few examples like that, usually you can drill down to some themes. Okay, in these types of situations, I tend to lean this way with my self-talk, Or another exercise you can do is, identify one of those thoughts, one of those things you told yourself to make it okay, and ask yourself,
Mhm.
okay, if that's true, like let's say you're like, okay, I need to make calls, instead I'm going to go buy toner, and your thought was, I'm not going to be successful making these calls, or no one's gonna sign up with me, no matter how many
Nope.
calls I make or whatever. Say that's what you told yourself. Then you could ask yourself, okay, if that's true, what does that say about me? And then you usually get to some kind of deeper held belief about yourself. So maybe it's like, I'm a failure. Maybe it's, I'm not worthy of success. Maybe, any number of things. But once you identify those themes, or once you can identify those deeper beliefs that you have about yourself or about others or whatever, then we go into, okay, let's go historical here. When's the first time you remember having that kind of thought? And a lot of times people throw up stories from childhood, you know. But one comes to mind, a client I worked with one time. Guy, in life looked to be pretty successful, but he had a lot of self-doubt. And we did this exercise, and he tells me a story about being like 6 or 7 and not doing well in a baseball game, and his dad really getting on him about it, and how he just sat in his room and cried and felt so bad about himself. And we don't think about it. I don't think we give enough credit to like how that affects a kid, and the things that follow us in life. And I'm not trying to say everything that bad that happens to somebody is their parents' fault. And I'm not trying to tie everything to childhood trauma. That is like the cliche.
90% of it
I mean,
is,
that's
right?
the cliche, in this field. Um, but it's cliche for a reason. There is a lot of that, and so, but that's where I would go. Like, what's your thought in the moment? Then we figure out some deeper held beliefs from there. And then from there we go to, where did those originate? Where do those beliefs come from? And that's where we get into the past usually. But then the nice part is, once we get there, we're usually able to figure out flaws, you know? So like the guy I mentioned who had this experience with dad getting on him about the baseball game. So I asked him, okay, well, you're a grown up now, you're a father. If your kid had a bad game like that, how would you handle it? And he's like, well, I would be encouraging, and if he was upset and crying, I'd give him a hug and tell him, it's all right, man. You just got to do your best, you know? And so then I ask, well, okay, what's the right here, right now version of that? You know, um, whatever we needed back then is what we need now. We just need the adult version.
Yeah, and I think, what you're talking about too, it's always so good to have that second set of eyes. You're telling the story about the baseball game, and it made me think, my son was playing T-ball when he was younger, and, I mean, these kids, they don't know what's going on, and I'm standing up on tell a story on myself here. I'm standing up on the bleachers yelling, giving direction, and all of a sudden, I just feel this tug on my shorts, and I look down, and my wife is sitting there, and she looks up at me, and she says, "Do you really wanna be that parent?" And it was like, whoa, what a great, opportunity to look in the mirror and say, is this the behavior that I wanna, exhibit? So I think having, somebody like you, or a loved one, somebody, an accountability partner or whatever it is, to help us look in that mirror too, to see, okay, what are these behaviors? Why am I doing it? And is it really who I wanna be? Because I think that's a big part of this too, is, do we feel like we're being incongruent? This is who I say I am. This is who I aspire to be. This is who I want the world to see. And then, is my behavior actually aligning with that, or is it, detracting from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super important. Yeah. Looking at what we want and how are we getting there? Are we moving toward that or moving away from it? Absolutely. All right, everybody, that's the end of this episode. If you found this helpful and you're watching it on YouTube, please click subscribe. If you're on Apple or Spotify, give us a follow, give us a review. We'd love your feedback. That's it for today.